KCAA, the Inland Talk Express.
Thank you for tuning in for this edition of Justice Watch with Attorney Zulu Ali. I am Attorney Zulu Ali with the Justice Watch crew, Rosa Nunez, Michael Bilal Clark, Dr. Akil Bashir, and Andrea Rodeman. This week, like every week, we'll be discussing critical legal and social justice issues that are impacting our communities. This week, we'll be discussing the school-to-prison pipeline. And joining us today is our very, very special guest, Richard M. Johnson III. Mr. Johnson is a teacher for 21 years at the Chaffee Joint Unified School District at the Ontario High School. He received his or completed his undergraduate training at Arizona State University and Chapman University, and he's currently the advisor of the Black Student Union in MECHA, and he's also the head basketball coach at Ontario High School. He is also the Far West Regional Polaris of Iota Phi Theta Fraternity Incorporated, who's been holding it down in the community since 1963. Thank you. We really appreciate you joining us for our discussion today.
Appreciate you guys having me.
Right. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the some of the statistics, and they're very alarming statistics. I believe they say that African American youth make up 16% of all the youth in the general population, but 30% of juvenile court referrals, 38% of youth in residential placement, and 58% of youth admitted to state adult prison. And a survey by Annie E. Casey Foundation of Youth Justice Agencies finds that the population of Black youth in juvenile detention, and this is just February of this year, reached a pandemic high. It says that while that of white youth was the second lowest recorded in more than a year, he said that Black youth stayed longer in detention than their white peers and even longer than before the pandemic began. It says that the population of Black and Latino youth grew 14% and 2% respectively, but from May 1st, 2020 through February the 1st, 2021, while the population of white non-Latino youth fell by 6%. Now, in 6 states, African American youth are at least 10 times as likely to be held in placement as are white youth. And those 6 states are New Jersey, Wisconsin, Montana, Delaware, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. And the disparity at which Black and white youth are held in juvenile facility has grown. And as African American youth were 5 times as likely as white youth to be detained or committed to youth facilities. It also says that Black students are almost 4 times as likely to be suspended, 3 times as likely to be expelled, 3 times as likely to be referred to police for an incident on the school grounds, 3.5 times as likely to be arrested for an incident either on school grounds or doing school activities. And elementary schools tend to discipline Black students more harshly than white students, leading to a considerable racial gap in expulsion and suspension. It says that teachers different treatment, and this is a research by Brown and Princeton universities, says that teachers different treatment of Black and white students accounted for 46% of the racial gap in suspensions and expulsions from school among 5 to 9-year-olds. And 21% of the gap could be explained by differences in the characteristics of schools that Black and white children attend predominantly, while differences in school behavior accounted for 9% of the gap. So it looks like we got a little bit of a mess when it comes to, you know, these numbers with youth. And I know that you've been in the game for you know, a couple of decades. And so I guess I'm just going to come out straight and ask you, I mean, why are the numbers so high?
Well, one of the major things that we're looking at and in education is there's a couple of components to this. Number one, we're looking at the lack of training for our educators when dealing with people of color, cultural sensitivity, being able to understand what the kids' home life is like, and as they come into schools, what the issues are with the students, and are we investing enough in understanding what those issues are facing our students. We have a lot of teachers that don't live in the particular community in which they teach. So their outlook on that particular community impacts how they treat the student.
Right. I can see that. I mean, that's kind of like what we were talking about when it came to police, right? When you're trying to, serve a community that you're not directly involved with, then obviously there's issues about your ability to understand, I guess, what they're dealing with and their particular situation. One of the things I did want to ask, and I know the last time we did this show, I told you a lot of people are always tuning in when it comes to this show. But at any rate, when it comes to this subject, but one of the things I want to talk about is I know that since probably, I guess maybe in the 90s, is that when we start seeing an expansion of more school resource officers in the schools?
Well, in California, they used to always have the proctors,
Mhm.
right? And those were they took the idea or the role of security on campus.
Mhm.
We still have security on campus, and they do have certain courses that they have to take. And along with that, at the high school level, Chaffey Junior High School District, we have our SROs, our school resource officers now,
Mhm.
that are police officers on campus.
Right. Do you think that has an impact on the numbers of like referrals to juvenile justice? Do you think that could be one of the
Well, the
factors?
numbers have gone up. When SROs started on campus, the numbers of juveniles entering the system from the school has definitely increased. I can tell you at our school, I think our school does a pretty good job. And we were fortunate enough to have a lot of SROs that were involved in the school community, doing a great job to make sure that they come to the football games, or they go to the graduations, or different things like that, where they're supporting the kids. A lot of time when you have that, they can pretty much diffuse the situation, and the respect issue is there between the student and that SRO.
Right.
And they have that relationship.
Right. Yeah, because I was thinking that, at least, one of the things that we were talking about, at least when we had the show the last time, was the prospect of the fact that you have an an RSO officer on the scene. They're called SRO or RSO?
School resource officer.
SRO.
Mhm.
And so the question would be, is it by bringing because I know in California, probably like everything else, it probably was something that was established a lot earlier than it was in some of the other places. But I know that like where I'm from originally in Tennessee, we kind of like went into the SRO, or the school resources officer, was kind of like something that happened around the 90s,
Mhm.
the mid 90s or so, especially when we started doing this whole um, community policing.
Right.
And it seemed like the community policing,
Mhm.
had an impact on that. So the question would be, I mean, now that you have more referrals, is it something that's happening in the school? As far as like those SROs more likely to treat them like they're criminals as opposed to students. Is that and that at least that's the scuttlebutt.
Well, and that's the thing there. We have a lot of times we look at the safety of the educator, right?
Mhm.
And that resource officer a lot of times is there not only to protect the students, but to make the teachers feel comfortable. In a lot of the situations that we have, a lot of them stem from behavioral problems from particular educators, and then it goes out into the as we say the campus, or the lunch area, or whatever have you. But a lot of that is coming directly from that particular the setting in the classroom, and they're looking to protect and create a safe environment there. But a lot of times, what are you doing when you do that? Do you criminalize your students to create a safer environment for the educator? Right. And that's the question, that's the dilemma, and we have seen the numbers since they started doing it. We have seen the numbers increase.
Wow. So the focus is, of course, a lot of times is that we're looking for the SRO. I guess theoretically, in many ways, is there to protect the educator.
A lot of times and I know when we have certain talks or meetings or staff meetings or surveys, is, do you feel safe on campus? Right.
Right.
And the question is, well, if I'm scared of the student, how can I teach them?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
If I fear that particular student, what type of education, what type of relationship am I really building with that student if I fear that particular student?
Right. I can see that. Yeah, that's interesting. Because I think, and that goes back to your first point when you're talking about living in the community, because obviously your perception of a student is going to be much different if you're not living in that community.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. And automatically becomes a situation of us and them.
Right.
Right. And we a lot of times, and in California, of course, we have our credentialing that we all have to do in our post grad. But when you get into that, is there anything that deters that us versus them attitude?
Right.
And that's what we're really looking at. One of the things we're trying to do, and really, I do a lot of mentoring of younger teachers, try to work with different universities, and when they do their student teaching, try to get involved in that process, but really have them understanding the relationship that you build with your classroom, or the relationship that you build with your students. You're a part of that team, right? And you're part of that team. So that means if that particular student isn't learning, then you're not teaching, right?
Wow.
So if you fail, I fail, right? So many times we hear a lot of teachers say, hey, well, I'm going to get paid regardless.
Wow.
And then that becomes that us versus them mentality. Like, I'm going to get mine regardless. And if you don't get this information, I'm still going to get mine.
Right.
So it's that us versus them right off the bat. And in our credentialing programs, they're not stressing enough the relationship building.
Radio show, but have no idea where to start? Or have you been hosting a podcast for a while and want to take it to the next level? If so, you need the Gab Radio Network. To host a show on the Gab Radio Network, all you need is your voice, and we'll handle the rest. From technical engineering to full-service audio production and much more. Every show on the Gab Radio Network can be heard on our station on the TuneIn Radio app. Plus, we put all of our shows on our satellite, which is accessed by over 5,500 stations. And here's the best part. You can host from anywhere you want. There are many means to connect to the Gab Radio Network remotely, and our staff of highly trained engineers and producers will make you sound like you're right here in studio. So, if you want to be on the Gab Radio Network, the same network that hosts the Small Business Advocate, Radio MD, and the Federalist, send an email right now to sales@gabradionetwork.com. That's sales@gabradionetwork.com.
Nubian Pictures presents a CCM Films production documentary entitled Purpose and Freedom. Keep your hand on the plow. This emotional and strong documentary tells the story of African-American lawyer Zulu Ali seeking justice and his purpose as a lawyer while crossing paths with Araceli, an undocumented immigrant from Mexico who is seeking her freedom. Together, they help discover their purpose and freedom in each other. Watch this incredible film today from iTunes Movies, YouTube Movies, Amazon Prime, and Google Play Movies. Learn about the cast and crew, links to purchase, and more at purposeandfreedommovie.com. Purpose and Freedom. Keep your hand on the plow. Available now. Rated G.
I did not feel safe. That's why I decided to come to California, because I didn't feel safe in Mexico.
It's kind of like the system, and if you go outside the system, then it becomes a struggle.
Are you an immigrant seeking defense representation and are looking to protect your rights? Or maybe someone who is experiencing an injustice or discrimination and need a lawyer you can trust? Well, that's exactly why you need the help of award-winning trial lawyer Zulu Ali. The law offices of Zulu Ali provides immigration defense representation for those seeking justice and looking to protect their rights. If you or a loved one needs professional legal advice and representation, then contact Zulu Ali. Zulu Ali's firm focuses on criminal law, family law, civil and personal injury, and international law. Zulu Ali is a former police officer and U.S. Marine, so you know you're in good hands. Serving all of California and immigration cases nationwide, representing victims and suspects at the International Criminal Court at The Hague. Call Zulu Ali today at 888-682-3049 or visit ZuluAliLaw.com.
Welcome back to Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali and the Justice Watch crew and our very special guest, Mr. Richard M. Johnson III. So before we went to the break, I know we were talking about, the SRO rather, the school resources officers. But also one of the things I want to talk about, and what's interesting when we go back to the whole issue of the type of individuals that we have that are teaching school. I know you said that you mentor many of these school teachers. I mean, is that the issue? Is the issue that we're not getting? Is it we don't get the right personnel? Or, I mean, I know that it could be more than one factor, but I'm just trying to figure out with those numbers and I'm reading here, it just says 5 times more likely. And we're not, and that's just, there's so many different problems because we also have other issues such as the lack of performance, for African American students. Then you have the whole issue of the discipline that happens in school and the discipline when it comes to being sent over to, juvenile justice. And so is it in the school or is it out of the school? So in other words, I mean, have we failed these kids?
Well, it's the village,
Mhm.
and that's the thing is the blame. We could always point the finger, a little bit more towards coming up with the solution, in terms of understanding that it's a great triangle, right? And I always tell my children, my students, this: hey, it starts from the parents. The parents have their job, the students have their responsibility,
Right.
and the educator or that particular school system has its particular responsibility in that as well. So it's a great triangle to try to uplift and uphold, to create these kids, help these kids have success, to create success for these particular kids. That particular gap that we have in terms of the achievement gap, when we talk about the triangle at home, I was just talking to some of the brothers about some of the things that we did when we were younger and what our parents had. Sesame Street, Reading Rainbow. We had things such as Texas Instrument. I mean, for me, it was a big deal. Texas Instrument came out with the Speak and Spell and Speak and Math, and that was, Atari was there and television was there. But I remember I was getting those things for Christmas. So a lot of things, that my parents put in front of me, right, allowed me to continuously enjoy learning. So when I went into kindergarten, I went into first grade, there was a certain skill set that I had already had, and that's important there. We go into with the educators, same thing. There's a certain skill set that they have to have, understanding the background of the children in which they are teaching. So we can't complain about, hey, well, this kid came in and he came in with a lower skill set, right? Knowing that means I have to be that much more creative. And that's when we talk about the profession. That's why I love the profession, because it's an art form. It's ever changing. We're the only profession, and if you look at schools, we're still teaching the way they did 100 years ago, where it's for setting kids and setting people to go into labor and factories and different things. And now we want our kids to be innovative and we want them to be creative, and we fall behind a little bit. So now there's this massive push to try to restructure everything, but you can't restructure if you're still teaching like you did 100 years ago.
Right. That's so true. I mean, I could just imagine. I mean, there's so many different things. I mean, we could actually just have a show, a whole radio show on this subject, to be honest with you, because some of the things that are coming to my mind, when I'm thinking about what's happening, with our young, men and women, and because one of the issues, obviously, going into the school system is it worse? I mean, I don't remember. I mean, so in other words, when we think about the 50s and we think about the 60s, as we get up into the 70s, especially when we start talking about the timeline in the 1980s, when we get to the the so-called crack era, right? I mean, was it that bad back then? I mean, hasn't it just gotten worse? And is that due to, and we, I don't want to sound like cliche, I know this sounds like, kind of cliche, but is it the breakdown of the family?
Well, I think that has something to do with it. It has that's a component of it. The breakdown of the family again, how we set our kids up as they go into school. A lot of times, our kids are being suspended and expelled for behavioral problems, and that's something that we're saying, hey, wait a minute, we're taking these kids out of the classroom for behavioral problems. Again, talking to some of my fraternity brothers, Iota Phi Theta Fraternity Incorporated, about how we handled problems in school. One of the things that we always talked about was that our parents, I know specifically mine, said, hey, the teacher wrongs you in any way, or there was something that you feel was not just, you come to me first, and then I'll address it. And we didn't have the voice to talk back to anyone that was an authoritative figure or that was older than we were. That was part of how we grew up. Now, ask that question. Now you got CPS and everybody else saying that, but back, it was a time, if you said that and the kids said, yeah, you knew that kid's behavior was going to be a little different. You knew if you called home, you're going to expect to change.
Right.
A lot of times now when we call home, it's defensive first. Parents can be defensive at times instead of getting to the bottom of the situation to help out. And when I make calls home, my situation is, hey, let's work to find a solution to create success for the kid. But then that comes back to the teacher. Because no one is clean, and this comes back to the teacher, because if the only time I call home is on a negative point, then they're automatically going to be defensive. Why are you calling me? Sometimes we got to give calls when your student gets that A, or a student might have been a failing student and they got a C on that test, right? And you show the improvement there, and we got to say, hey, mom, hey, dad, they did an excellent job. They're changing here. We're starting to see that. And just as we put those calls in for failures or bad behavior, if we start putting those calls in on the good side of things, when they achieve success, now we're building again that relationship. Everything comes back to that relationship that we have. A lot of people in the business field, they'll say, hey, well, what is our return on investment? You hear that a lot, ROI. Well, a young brother by the name of Cleo Thurman says, well, hey, what about the ROR, right? The return on relationship. Once you invest in that relationship, both as a parent and a teacher, you're not going to do anything but benefit the kid. Right. The student is going to achieve success because everybody is communicating.
Wow. Man, that's good. I mean, obviously you know, and it's amazing, and that's why it's important to have a great school teacher. It makes a huge difference when you have somebody. What did you say, Andrea?
No, I said, speaking from experience, it absolutely is. It absolutely is.
Yeah, you have school children, and you have school-age children, right?
I have an 8-year-old young black male, and I've gone through some things with the school that he goes to. It's a non-traditional school, but, my son is a very, his rigor for academia was sky high. But one incident, unfortunately, kind of messed him up a little bit. And to this day, he's going to the 4th grade. This incident happened to him when he was in the 2nd grade, and he still talks about how the teacher would not listen to him and would not let him speak, and it broke his little heart. My son's he's a really good kid, but he didn't listen. He did not listen, and to this day, he talks about if teachers would just listen. And so I actually had him have a meeting with the principal because they wanted to find out, what can they do to help the African American students. Number one, stop shutting them down and listen to what they have to say. They're not all bad, but they just immediately assumed that one person was telling the truth and my son was not, and just so happened my son was a black one, the other one was not.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? It's just
Don't lose that thought, Don.
Okay.
Dedicated radio program that's sweeping the nation, and you don't want to miss it. Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali, the voice of justice for the people. The focus of Justice Watch is to provide an honest analysis and viable solutions to the criminal and social justice crisis in America and the world from a Black, brown, working class, and socially disadvantaged perspective, and to motivate listeners to be informed and part of the solution. Zulu Ali is joined by the Justice Crew, consisting of Rosa Nunez, Michael Clark, Dr. Akil Bashir, and Charito Ali to tackle the most pressing issues. Host attorney Zulu Ali is a former police officer, U.S. Marine Corps veteran, and an award-winning trial lawyer who focuses on representing persons accused of crimes, immigrants, victims of discrimination, and persons seeking civil justice. Find out how to listen to Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali at justicewatchradio.com. Nubian Pictures presents a CCM Films production documentary entitled Purpose and Freedom. Keep Your Hand on the Plow. This emotional and strong documentary tells the story of African-American lawyer Zulu Ali, seeking justice and his purpose as a lawyer, while crossing paths with Araceli, an undocumented immigrant from Mexico who is seeking her freedom. Together, they help discover their purpose and freedom in each other. Watch this incredible film today from iTunes Movies, YouTube Movies, Amazon Prime, and Google Play Movies. Learn about the cast and crew, links to purchase, and more at purposeandfreedommovie.com. Purpose and Freedom. Keep your hand on the plow. Available now. Rated G.
I did not feel safe. That's why I decided to come to California, because I didn't feel safe in Mexico.
It's kind of like the system, and if you go outside the system, then it becomes a struggle.
Are you an immigrant seeking defense representation and are looking to protect your rights? Or maybe someone who is experiencing an injustice or discrimination and need a lawyer you can trust? Well, that's exactly why you need the help of award-winning trial lawyer Zulu Ali. The law offices of Zulu Ali provides immigration defense representation for those seeking justice and looking to protect their rights. If you or a loved one needs professional legal advice and representation, then contact Zulu Ali. Zulu Ali's firm focuses on criminal law, family law, civil and personal injury, and international law. Zulu Ali is a former police officer and U.S. Marine, so you know you're in good hands. Serving all of California and immigration cases nationwide, representing victims and suspects at the International Criminal Court at The Hague. Call Zulu Ali today at 888-682-3049 or visit ZuluAliLaw.com.
Welcome back to Justice Watch with Attorney Zulu Ali and the Justice Watch crew and our very special guest, Mr. Richard M. Johnson III, and our discussion on school-to-prison pipeline. Sorry I cut you off, Doc, but what was you getting ready to do?
No, that's all right. Just a couple of quick points, Brother Ali. Again, I'm so glad to hear Mr. Johnson and his impression on things. One of the most important things in the school system is for our young adults to see that imagery that they can cling to and that imagery that can make them much more empowered. When we think about a school situation, I mean, Dr. Naeem Akbar says it well. By the 5th grade, most black young men are totally interested in the school system and don't want any part of it. Why is that? When we look at the average teacher, which is a white woman, 24, 25, 26 years of age, their perception and their narrative, as my brother so well said, it comes from a totally different perspective. So if a young child is not being empowered, if a young child does not see the degree of greatness, if a young child does not see themselves being articulated in the concept of what they can be, why would they be interested in a system that continuously degrades them, that continuously says they have no value, and that continuously puts them in connection with those school officers or that detention center? So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think we got to concentrate. What is the real outcome that those schools are really trying to produce? Lastly, when I was coming up, we were very fortunate. We had Sister Claire Muhammad's. I came out of the Panther Party. We had our own schools. And so that imagery of that level of greatness and what we stood for was always being reinforced. So we were constantly pushed to a state of self-mastery and self-betterment because we knew at the end of the day, we could be the best that we can be. I don't think these school systems come anywhere close to energizing our young adults in that capacity.
Right. Yeah. And I know you got a few questions there, but one of the questions also I want to say, that you brought up, I think that comes out of this is why can't we we need so many more young, black men and women,
Yes.
but definitely a lot more black men in the education. I mean, what is it about? Why don't we have more black men in education, you think?
Well, it's the peacock, right? It's not a sexy thing, right? And we know our kids. I call it the peacock. There, it's not, it's not sexy. I don't have jewels and all that different stuff, but the empowerment piece is sexy, right? And the younger brothers and sisters need to understand that true empowerment is a thing that can propel us in the heights that we can't even imagine. The voice, as I was speaking to earlier, the voice of the parents, right? Voice of the parents. I love that you said Dr. Dewar came out of the Black Panther schools,
Yes, sir.
where we saw
Yes,
we
sir.
saw parents go in and take control
That's right.
and say, hey, wait a minute, I am just as much a part and responsible for my kids' education, how that
Yes.
self-image,
Yes.
right? And when we know these things, and this is the what I always look at and want to start talking to a lot of our parents, a lot of Black and brown parents. If we know there's a problem and we know these numbers are there, we trust the system to give our kids that particular image. And then we complain when that image is not brought to light.
Teach.
So one of the things, and what they're doing, and I'll give a shout out to Ranch Cucamonga High School principal Eduardo Zaldivar, and they have a brother who's going to be the principal coming in, Brother Josh Kirk. Shout out to him and the brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. He's going to be the principal coming up next year. They have a great system with their parents, the African American Parental Advisory Committee that they have started there. They're doing an excellent job with changing curriculum, doing an excellent job of sparking the conversation. Why do we need Africana studies? Why do you need African American literature course? Hey, ethnic studies. Hey, Chicano studies courses. I mean, these are all things that are brought. So when we talk about that self-image, and when we talk about that light, right? That's the sexy part. That's the part when we talk about mathematics for my Hispanic brothers and sisters, and we talk about the concept of zero, right? And we talk about the Aztecs, and we can understand where that comes from. And for somebody to understand that, hey, wait a minute, I can't just say that I'm not good at math because math is in your blood, right? When we look at the science and we look at astronomy and we talk about the things that the African brothers and sisters did and all the stuff that we brought to this country prior to Columbus coming to this country, prior to Cortez coming to this country, right? But you would never know that if we wait around for someone else to teach you that information. So the parents at Rancho Cucamonga High School have done a great job of coming in and raising the question and sparking the conversation, and they're creating that particular positive change. And now we're seeing that imagery shift.
Outstanding.
So that's a good thing that's going on right now.
Wow.
Outstanding.
Rosa,
Yeah,
you the youngest person here, I believe.
I think so.
Yeah. So with Mr. Johnson, I mean, when he talks about, what he feels, and I'm really in on that whole thing about learning culture and really learning it from, I mean, that's huge because it changes your perspective.
That's right.
And it changes
right.
the perspective even of your peers.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yes,
I think
sir.
that's important.
Yes, sir.
Definitely. Well, growing up myself in the low-income community, daughter to immigrants, I did kind of witness the zero tolerance policies that are implemented in a lot of our school systems that tend to penalize students. A lot of these policies really criminalize students for minor infractions, per se, or minor things that could easily be dealt with by school administrators. We definitely need more programs that enhance school counseling, and people who can come into the school settings to kind of diffuse these encounters with students. We definitely do have the people that are in the proctors, per se, that are there to oversee certain actions within the school system. But I do think that we need to kind of hold our administrators accountable for the positions that they have been put into these schools to partake in. I do from my own personal experience, where we would have counselors who weren't even accessible to the students, and their jobs were, to be accessible to us, the students, the people that they were put in place there to serve. I do believe that we need to recognize more positive behavior from our students as well. That's definitely building that relationship with the parent. Definitely the positive behavior is important, especially in communities where a lot of the parents don't understand the school systems themselves.
Right.
We do also, I think we need to work with police departments and court systems to keep and limit the arrest of these students at schools. I think there is problems that could be dealt with school administrators instead of involving the police themselves. We also, the whole aspect of really empowering the community and the parents to come in, I do definitely believe that that's very instrumental in really helping students succeed. You know, having the parents come into schools and letting them know that they do have power. A lot of these parents do not feel sufficiently educated, or maybe there's a language barrier that keeps them from going into these schools. How can we connect them to those teachers? How can we connect them to those administrators? So everything that has been said here is definitely something that is very instrumental in changing the school system. And I myself, like I said, growing up in a low-income community, I know that a lot of students can benefit from a lot of these positive things that we've been talking about today.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and that was one of the things that, you know, we talked about building, you know, leaders. And I think that when you look at, when you begin to start, you know, providing an educational foundation that, you know, highlights, you know, the greatness of our past.
Yes, sir.
I think that could be very instrumental in creating leaders. I mean,
Yes,
some people,
sir.
I mean, when you have an education that basically is pretty much creates a narrative where it doesn't even talk about you, then I think that sometimes, you know, that could, you know, have obviously a negative effect on your ability to, you know, what you're capable of doing.
Right.
You know. Yeah. So, but you know, I think that's one of the issues. I did want to talk about the Ma'Khia Bryant thing. And the reason why I wanted to talk about Ma'Khia Bryant is because you know, I know, well, there's a couple of things. Are you familiar with that dog?
You talking about the one that was stabbed?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the one that was stabbing, or one that was allegedly
the one that
stabbing.
had the knife. Are you very familiar with it?
And the reason why I want to talk about it is I thought about this. There's a couple of things, and I think it kind of, okay, well, I don't know if I can get deep into it, but anyway, at least I'm going to set it up. The reason why I think it's related, because obviously this is a 16-year-old girl that was in a foster home.
Yep.
So if you look at the video and you see that she's in the process of stabbing someone, and the officer comes on and he sees that someone is being stabbed. And, you know, in light of that, then he uses deadly force because he's trying to prevent someone else. I mean, clearly that was a pretty hostile situation if you're coming on the scene, right? So I think arguably, because it becomes a much bigger issue, because basically what the conversation is specifically about what the officer saw when he got on on location. But, you know, from my experience being a police officer, what I wanted to know was, and this is where you start seeing the way that they treat different people. When so the girl makes a call and says that she basically is being threatened by some other individuals.
Yes.
So typically, if you're in dispatch, you're going to say, okay, what's your name? What are you wearing? What are they wearing? Please stay on the phone with me. I have a unit en route, right?
That's right.
Don't go outside, and then you got you see what I mean?
Yeah.
That's right.
But it changes. But anyway, I want to just finish. We got to go to a break. I'll finish up with that on the other side of the break. Please do not touch that dial.
There's a new nationally syndicated radio program that's sweeping the nation, and you don't want to miss it. Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali, the voice of justice for the people. The focus of Justice Watch is to provide an honest analysis and viable solutions to the criminal and social justice crisis in America and the world from a Black, brown, working class, and socially disadvantaged perspective, and to motivate listeners to be informed and part of the solution. Zulu Ali is joined by the Justice Crew, consisting of Rosa Nunez, Michael Clark, Dr. Akil Bashir, and Charito Ali to tackle the most pressing issues. Host attorney Zulu Ali is a former police officer, U.S. Marine Corps veteran, and an award-winning trial lawyer who focuses on representing persons accused of crimes, immigrants, victims of discrimination, and persons seeking civil justice. Find out how to listen to Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali at justicewatchradio.com. Nubian Pictures presents a CCM Films production documentary entitled Purpose and Freedom. Keep your hand on the plow. This emotional and strong documentary tells the story of African-American lawyer Zulu Ali seeking justice and his purpose as a lawyer while crossing paths with Araceli, an undocumented immigrant from Mexico who is seeking her freedom. Together, they help discover their purpose and freedom in each other. Watch this incredible film today from iTunes Movies, YouTube Movies, Amazon Prime, and Google Play Movies. Learn about the cast and crew, links to purchase, and more at purposeandfreedommovie.com. Purpose and Freedom. Keep your hand on the plow. Available now. Rated G.
I did not feel safe. That's why I decided to come to California, because I didn't feel safe in Mexico.
It's kind of like the system, and if you go outside the system, then it becomes a struggle.
Are you an immigrant seeking defense representation and are looking to protect your rights? Or maybe someone who is experiencing an injustice or discrimination and need a lawyer you can trust? Well, that's exactly why you need the help of award-winning trial lawyer Zulu Ali. The law offices of Zulu Ali provides immigration defense representation for those seeking justice and looking to protect their rights. If you or a loved one needs professional legal advice and representation, then contact Zulu Ali. Zulu Ali's firm focuses on criminal law, family law, civil and personal injury, and international law. Zulu Ali is a former police officer and U.S. Marine, so you know you're in good hands, serving all of California and immigration cases nationwide, representing victims and suspects at the International Criminal Court at The Hague. Call Zulu Ali today at 888-682-3049 or visit ZuluAliLaw.com.
Welcome back to Justice Watch with Attorney Zulu Ali and the Justice Watch crew and our very special guest, Mr. Richard Johnson. So what I was getting at is when oftentimes I believe it starts with, that's where it starts with dispatch, the way things are dispatched sometimes in our communities. So oftentimes, you know, if you're going to a certain neighborhood, you know, then oftentimes the dispatcher is going to dispatch the information in a way in which that is very vague. So, you know, I haven't heard it, so I could be wrong. But oftentimes when you have communities where that are specifically our communities, Black and brown communities, when this, you know, they'll give you vague things like, you know, there's a 415, or there's disturbing, there's a fight. You know what I mean? So assuming that she called and they sent him out to a fight, then that's negligent because it's more than that. I mean, has the dispatcher said, for example, if he came from a different community, then the dispatcher might have said, okay, ma'am, you know, let me assess the situation. What are you doing? Do not go outside. What do the people look like? I have the officer on the other line. Dispatch, the officer says, look, I got the person on the other line. I told him not to go outside. I told him to stay on the phone with me until you get there. When the officer gets there, you'll meet the officer. You know what I mean?
Right,
and so,
right.
you know, so, and you see those things happening sometimes. And, you know, so you got the officer, in many ways, maybe the officer, because of lack of information, maybe he could have inquired more, or maybe the dispatcher could have given more information. But from that perspective, as soon as you get that call, that's what you want to know. If you're saying that don't tell me there's a fight. Well, I want to know something else. I mean, you know, you're telling me it's a fight. So when I get there, then obviously you're trained, you're based upon the information that you have. Mm-hmm. So when you get there and you see someone in the process of stabbing somebody, you're going to get tap. Right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
But if the dispatcher would have, I mean, we see it on television all the time. How many times have we heard 911 calls when they say the victim tell them you always tell the victim to stay on the phone,
right, until
the person gets there. And then, not to mention, you remember the kid. What was that? You remember the kid that had the AK-47? His name was. How was his name?
Kyle Rittenhouse. 17-year-old?
Yeah.
Talking about the whiteboard.
Yeah, in
Yes.
Kenosha, Wisconsin.
That was him.
Yeah, so he goes in
Yeah.
there and basically with an AR-15. I mean, the officers all around him, and you got a 15-year-old kid, or a 17-year-old kid walking around with a rifle, and basically he wasn't even arrested on the scene.
No, he wasn't. He was allowed to walk away.
They gave him water, right?
Yeah.
They said that
They
during
did.
the fall,
They gave him water.
and just told him, whatever, man, go on home. So I mean, I think that's the reason why people are beginning to start seeing that there could be differences in the way in which we treat people. It doesn't begin on, what happens in the street happens in the classroom.
Oh, yes.
Well,
You know what I mean?
yes.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I mean, when you have such, and maybe even within, can you imagine in the school where you have, RSOs or SROs rather, that are encountering situations, are they dealing with students that same way? You know what I mean? These perceptions in a way that you see, when you think of a usual suspect, you have an idea in your mind. And we heard just recently, and I got to look it up. I had the information. We have to, where these 3 officers were discussing, and actually it's a jurisdiction where I think there's a black police chief, where these officers were saying, we're getting ready to set them back 400 years. They got caught in this private conversation.
I remember.
Yeah. So, so you got all this going on, and at the same time, and we're up against a lot, but it's time for our community to, and I love when you said, we can't leave it in their hands. We have to, as a community, start going to these schools, getting involved, not only in our own children's life, but get involved in other children if need be.
Yes.
Because it's a village.
Yes.
A child is, every child belongs to us. And we do need to start, getting involved. And then we want to put school teachers and the school teachers that, like yourself, who are really in there and in the fight, that really wants to do well. You need that backup. You need that support. You need the community to support you. You made a point. You said it basically, when it comes from you, you're just your teacher. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then and so we need to, when we're marching and whenever we're making a lot of noise, we don't only need to make noise in response.
Right.
We need to be proactive and
Right.
supporting, our educators. And to me, I said this in the show. You remember when I said it in the show? Who's more important? Rosa, you remember that? I said the educators are the most important people that we have. Are our educators, the ones that are the minds of our young people. So yeah, man, I applaud your profession and what you do and your paradigm and what you bring to the occupation, because it's just critical, because those are the formative years of our young men and women, which shapes, we got to get them when they're young.
That's right.
Because when they come to me, it's too late.
Right.
You know what I mean? I get them on the back end. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, when we can get them, catch them early and get them on the front end, then we're really going to start seeing some changes.
Yes.
Let me tell you, I get them right in the middle, Brother Ali, and it's pure hell. So,
yeah. So, but man, I you've been dropping some jewels. I know that.
well, I want to go back to this sister real quick, Ali. You talk about the police officers in that situation. Well, why is it always when we talk about retraining them, they don't have to be retrained in their engagement with white people? So it goes to the value system. They're not valuing our people when they come up on these situations. So their prejudgment in their evaluation is not extended to the time period that they do their own. They give every benefit of the doubt. But our situation, because there's so much devaluing of human life, they feel so free to take that life.
Yeah.
Even though in this situation, I've got to give it to the cop, he had the right to make that split-second decision based on the fact that that girl was being assaulted. But still, did the perception and would the perception have been different had he had more value as seeing this as a big black woman, and she was a heavy-set black woman attacking, and I've got to take her out. So we got those questions are pertinent.
And even before that, I think that what the bigger question is, when these complaints are being met, from the very beginning. Before you, is it, if you know that you're going to a certain place in South Central, your perception and response before you even get there, is different than when you're going to, you know, an affluent neighborhood.
Well, yeah, that's, you know, one of the things in the police profession as well as in teaching. You're in a position of servant leadership. And a lot of times we forget the servant part and we just think we're just leaders. And in our classrooms, we don't understand that we are here to serve these children and these parents. And our leadership is what's going to get them to be where they need to be. But a lot of times we skip right to the leadership. And so many times when we're training teachers that, hey, your classroom is your classroom. You're the king in that classroom. No, that's not actually the case. Actually, you're a servant of the community, just like a police officer is a servant of the community. So servant leadership is a difficult job, but we have to understand that first and the psyche that comes with that when you choose to get into that profession.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they're very similar. I mean, you know, the law enforcement, I mean, as we've seen the corruption, even in education, you know, like we seen not too long ago where they were paying, you remember the scandal where these people were paying to get their children into certain university schools? You know what I mean? Is that it? You gotta be kidding me, man.
Went fast. Hey, I appreciate you brothers having me on.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you being there, man. Again, thank you, Mr. Richard M. Johnson, teacher at Chaffee Joint Unified School District and Far West Regional Polaris of Iota Phi Theta Fraternity Incorporated, who's been holding down the community since 1963. But at any rate, we'll see you next week, same time, same place, same channel.
There's a new nationally syndicated radio program that's sweeping the nation, and you don't want to miss it. Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali, the voice of justice for the people. The focus of Justice Watch is to provide an honest analysis and viable solutions to the criminal and social justice crisis in America and the world from a black, brown, working class, and socially disadvantaged perspective, and to motivate listeners to be informed and part of the solution. Zulu Ali is joined by the Justice Crew, consisting of Rosa Nunez, Michael Clark, Dr. Akil Bashir, and Charito Ali to tackle the most pressing issues. Host attorney Zulu Ali is a former police officer, U.S. Marine Corps veteran, and an award-winning trial lawyer who focuses on representing persons accused of crimes, immigrants, victims of discrimination, and persons seeking civil justice. Find out how to listen to Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali at justicewatchradio.com.
NBC News Radio, I'm Tammy Trujillo. Former Vice President Mike Pence is criticizing the Manhattan DA for possibly pursuing charges against Donald Trump. Pence said indicting a former president would be a politically charged move.
Just feel like it's just not what the American people want to see. We got real challenges in this country today.
Pence spoke on ABC's This Week. Today marks the 20th anniversary of the war in Iraq. President George W. Bush formally announced the start of the war in a televised address on March 19, 2003. The U.S. declared an end to the war nearly 10 years after the fighting began. The Powerball jackpot continues to grow. Lottery officials say nobody picked all 6 numbers in last night's drawing. That means Monday night's jackpot in the multi-state lottery game will be worth at least $86 million. As for Tuesday's Mega Millions jackpot, that will be worth at least $272 million. Tammy